in days like today, don't worry, we're going to keep covering the debate. I'm sure it's going to be a major topic that Ryan and I cover. And I'm going to bring in one of the socialists who we have helped get elected to office here on the Central Committee. We did a very small part, but I'm proud to say we were on the train for Representative Ryan Clancy, the legendary socialist in Milwaukee, who is pissing off all the right people, a man after my own heart. And we're going to bring him on. So if you're here for debate coverage, don't worry. We're going to be, I'm sure, discussing it. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to keep reading all the chat. Hey, okay, look at that. We did it. Hello. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute. Let's see if we can get. Are you there?
I
Representative
am here,
Clancy, are you there? Okay.
I am here, and thank you so much. Appreciate
it. Now, chat, I hope you don't mind our humble ways as a Twitch streamer, because this is how we operate in a very... we do it live. We do it live. This is the ultimate grassroots form of political discourse. Let me go ahead and bring up your bio, because if you're a longtime Mike from PA viewer, you know exactly who Ryan is. But if you're new here because of debate coverage or you're a casual fan, Ryan is somebody who has been part of the socialist movement for decades. In fact, one of the things that really made me know that you would stand apart is you traveled to Iraq and stood against American forces and put your body between them and Iraqi civilians. And that is one of the most insane things and most brave things I've ever heard in my life. I could never in a million years do something that brave. You were protested at Standing Rock. You have been focused on community organizing, on police reform, on standing with Black Lives Matter. You have been an incredible person. You're an incredible activist your entire career. And that is the type of person that we rarely see in America. And one of the things I would say is, with Ryan, everybody, is, I hope you don't mind me calling you Ryan.
No, that's great, and please keep going. Like I don't normally get intros like this. Normally it's like
the reason
socialist Clancy. So please, I mean, I'm touched.
The reason why I do that is because, you know, I see myself in you in some small part, because as somebody who naively got into politics to try to make marginal improvements that seemed very common sense to me, I ran right into the brick wall that is the corrupt establishment Democratic Party, and they're evil and they don't mind saying it to you behind closed doors, but then they act like wounded animals whenever they get criticized out in public. So I know that you are, you know, facing, just like, you know, Jamal Bowman. You're the state level Jamal Bowman in Milwaukee. You're being targeted by all the worst people. And so I wanted to bring you on and, you know, give everybody the opportunity to support you, because AIPAC isn't going to drop 25 million in your race. And I feel like if, you know, a few people help support your campaign, we can beat back a lot of the scumbags that are trying to defeat you and defending genocide, defending police murder, defending, you know, homelessness and developers against your quite frankly, common sense and reasonable reforms. You know, I don't see you as a Leninist. I don't see you doing, you know, taking people out, you know, in a revolutionary violence. I see you asking them to, like, maybe build some public housing.
Right. Yeah, no, we're not going to give folks the wall till next week. It's the long
All right.
I appreciate you calling me reasonable, though. Again, not a charge often levied at me.
Well, I think it's all, you know, it is the main problem that we have in this country, Representative Clancy, is that so unreasonable stuff is considered reasonable. And those people that are sane are treated as if they're maladjusted because, you know, if you allowed this type of politics, like a reasonable democratic socialist or social democratic politics to exist in America, the Democratic Party wouldn't have a constituency, and they know that. And so their number one tactic is to personally assassinate every single person who says, "Hey, we can do it a better way." So with that intro, I'd like to bring on Representative Clancy and to ask you, what are you facing this year, and how can we help?
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you again, and I think you may be underselling yourself. When I was first elected back in 2020, I won by 48 votes, and when I became along with Rep. Madison, we restarted the Socialist Caucus at the state for the first time in 86 years. He also ran a really contested primary. So no, support and donations, frankly, have been really critical to that. And you're right, AIPAC's not going to drop 20 million in this race, but they don't need to. And in fact, what kind of overshadowed Bowman's defeat was several state races in which AIPAC and kind of AIPAC related dollars at the New York state level were heavily influenced and in a couple of cases defeated by Zionist dollars. So
yeah,
it is important to push back. But yeah, all of those things that I've done have made me enemies, and I think all the right enemies, right? I mean, something like the right to counsel, which provides attorneys for folks facing eviction.
Can you explain? Not to interrupt, but can you explain? Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you explain exactly what you did and what the right to counsel was about?
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. And what the right to counsel looks like in Milwaukee County is providing an attorney to anybody at twice or below the federal poverty level. So most people facing eviction, as it turns out, people are not often evicted from mansions. And that helps even the playing field, because we know that almost every landlord has an attorney and almost every tenant does not, especially if they're facing eviction. And it's been incredibly popular. For every dollar that we spend on that, we save $3, not trying to get kids back in school and people back in jobs, and providing services for folks once they're without housing. And everybody loves it now. In fact, the mayor, who just endorsed against me, and the county executive, who just endorsed against me, both came to me and asked me not to pass it before I did. And then afterwards, because it's been so popular, have run on it and taken credit for it. And it is wild, the enemies that you make, both with landlords, developers, and the folks beholden to them. For doing something that's so common sense and is really just harm reduction, right? I mean, the next step has to be cooperative housing.
Well, why do they want marginalized people that to be evicted when the law's on their side? Isn't the purpose of the law to be enforced? And it seems odd that you would be against having systems that ensure that tenants aren't being wrongfully evicted, because I'm sure people are still being evicted for not paying their rent, right? Like, you didn't change the law to make rent free. You changed the law to make sure that people got represented. So if, for example, the landlord wasn't fixing the apartment and it was uninhabitable, and the tenant took their money and fixed it instead of paying rent, if they get sued for not payment of rent, they can say, hey, I took the rent money and diverted it towards repairs so I could live in this place.
And that's exactly it. And the vast majority of time, it's not a tenant who's just like, I don't want to pay rent, or even that they can't. It's often something that is the landlord's fault. And even when it's not, having an attorney present makes things smoother. Sometimes it results in the person staying in their home, longer term. Sometimes it results in another month or two of time to move out and avoiding, eviction on somebody's record, which makes it really tough. And sometimes it results in the landlord doing the right thing and fixing the thing that was wrong or the thing that made it uninhabitable. But we have terrible landlords here, just like you do out there, that operate in bad faith. Often they're the larger out-of-state landlords, and we have a legislature full in Wisconsin of landlords who just make things worse. So at the state, one of the things I've done is put together a package of about 20 pieces of pro-tenant legislation called the Tenant Protection Package, and that pisses people off too.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about what you're trying to do is this is what the beginning of a socialist or progressive movement looks like. Like, obviously, the people like you that are the tip of the spear are going to pierce right into the heart of the Democratic Party that we need to reform. You can't go in there and play patty cake with these people. You have to show the differences between you, and people have to pick a side. And it may seem like it is, contentious or trenchant or whatever you want to call it. But the reality is either you're on the side of people that are working class and are struggling to make ends meet in our economy and can't afford rent and can't afford a down payment, or you're on the side of the people that are making big money coordinating rent increases with illegal, conspiracies. Like, you're on the side of, what's so funny is you're on the side of the administration in Washington because they're suing landlords for using an illegal algorithm to collude to raise rent. And you're on the side of the tenants who are being exploited. So how do you explain the Democratic politicians that say they represent working class people actually being on the side of landlords and developers that are out to make a profit? And oftentimes don't even live in the city.
Right. Yeah, and it's it's easy to say, and everybody does around here, regardless of party affiliation, mostly that you want affordable housing. But to them, affordable housing looks like handouts to developers. To me, it looks like cooperative housing. It looks like people, buying into something and then owning the place where they live, or at least being treated moderately fairly as a tenant. So it's wild. It's pissing off all the right people, really.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask, that's a really a question that I'm always interested in is what is the alternative to the status quo? Because I see a lot of people getting seduced by the so-called YIMBY movement, where it is like, yeah, if we just give more power to private developers, more power to landlords, we take away democratic power, it'll result in better housing outcomes. Do you agree with that, or do you have, what is the alternative? What is the Democratic Socialist alternative to the status quo that we have right now?
Yeah, it's to plan that out, right? So like right here in Milwaukee, we are talking about tearing down or modifying a big bridge that's been around for a long time. And people are framing it as a choice between tearing the whole thing down and then giving the land to developers with no significant plan, or doing nothing and just having this, big piece of infrastructure which could be better. And that's absolutely not it. I'm open to changing that as long as we have the result be, public housing or cooperative housing or things which would actually benefit the public rather than it just being a handout to developers. And that's really key. I mean, we're often faced with a really bipolar choice, which doesn't need to be like that. I'm in favor of making common sense changes. I'm not in favor, in this case, of throwing out every housing regulation and hoping that, affordable, reasonable housing will simply materialize out of nothing. That's been the strategy for decades now, and it's failing. Unless you're a developer, in which case it's fantastic, I'm sure.
What do you think about forming government supports for cooperative housing? I spent a lot of time in Vienna because of family, and they have basically a completely different housing system that is based around both social housing, so like cooperative development, as well as a very large store of public housing. And they invest a lot, not only in building new, but also refurbishing old. And it turns out that around 70% of Viennese citizens are eligible for public housing. So it keeps, and you only have to pass the test once. And then if you're in public housing, you could stay, no matter how much you end up making. And so it creates this diverse social mix. You don't know how rich somebody is due to their postal code. Rich people live right next to poor people, and there's no bad neighborhoods because people are integrated fully by socioeconomic status. And so there is a deeper investment in things like public housing and social spaces. There isn't, sacrifice zones. So what do you think about developing, instead of just, naysaying the private development, which I think, is an important part of what we do, about building these cooperative and nonprofit, or limited profit developers that are taking the place of the for-profit developers.
Yes, and we have a plan for that, right? So with Rep. Madison, the other socialist who came in with me just 2 years ago, he and I authored legislation that would do exactly that, that would stand up cooperative housing. It's everything from the boring stuff like revolving loan funds where, people can actually, get the capital together to do this, to standing it up and entrenching it and making that the default, making that the norm.
Right.
And even if you believe that people shouldn't have housing as a basic human right, the best effect, or one of the best effects of like people being able to take housing for granted, like you just pointed out, is that they can go on and take risks and do other things and be full, complete people. Whether it's the right to counsel or whether it's, cooperative housing, these things aren't just the right thing to do ethically. They make a ton of economic sense. And increasingly, we have to be making those arguments too. As weird as it is to go into offices and sit down with people and say, "Look, I know we all hate poor people here, but as it turns out, it's more efficient to do this than to just be cruel for no reason."
Well, I know. I mean, like the reason why you're getting so much smoke is because you do represent a legitimate threat, and that if your system is put into place, it will not be overturned. The people, I just pulled up an article from CNBC, the famously socialist news network, that said Vienna, Austria is the world's most livable city again, according to The Economist. And it is a city that dedicates itself to social public housing and public transit. And for example, when you go to Vienna, there are no turnstiles. Okay, you just walk. The public transit has, the fare enforcement is it's an honor system. And you might occasionally have a fare enforcer come up and say, "Hey, do you have a ticket?" And if you don't have a ticket, you get a $50 fine. But for the most part, it's an honor system. People could walk on. And the thing is, there also isn't like a bunch of unhoused people trying to get shelter in public transit because they have an apartment.
Right.
So public transit is safe and it's clean and it's available, and there is no oppressive fare enforcement, and you see a city where they do it functionally because they don't look at each individual problem in a silo. They look at it as a social system. And is that how you see yourself, as somebody who's advocating for a different social system and want to use examples that exist in the world rather than just trying to solve each individual problem like they're on their own?
Yeah. And it all has to come together. And when you solve one problem, you solve other problems too. In fact, at Milwaukee County, I was a Milwaukee County supervisor until April. We had two pieces of legislation there. One would have made transit free because people are paying $2 now. The actual cost of a bus ride is $5, $6. And it would have gotten rid of the whole idea of fare enforcement. And we know that
you could save literally millions from not doing that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole infrastructure around collecting money, and then what happens when people can't or don't want to pay. And the second part was that the security on the buses right now, they wanted to replace with sworn officers, with sheriffs, which I'm obviously very opposed to. I'm a police abolitionist, not just reformist. And we pushed back and wanted to put together a team of folks who would actually have mental health backgrounds and housing backgrounds to get folks who are being called, having the cops called on them right now to buses into services. Because as it turns out, the most common call for service on Milwaukee's bus line has nothing to do with fare enforcement or violence. It's people sleeping on them and trying not to freeze to death in the winter. Yeah. So the response to that is not some guy with a badge and a gun. It's somebody who can help them get into housing, or help them get mental health services or food, or meet their basic needs. So you're totally right. We have to stop looking at these piecemeal, but even just starting with those and being able to say, look, the right to counsel has worked incredibly well. Why don't we apply this model to other things too, is increasingly gaining traction, and it is making me a threat. And clearly a lot of folks are coming out of the woodwork to oppose that. So what are you facing? If you could give me an example of like you're a state legislator, you restarted the Socialist Caucus in Wisconsin, and what are you facing as far as in your local politics? Who's against you and why? Well, do you have that headline pulled up? It's really small on the little screen that I'm saying, but oh yeah, it says why are they opposing the incumbent Democrat? In a word, they hate him. Which I should point out, the first of many factual inaccuracies in this article is that is 3 words. They hate it.
Yeah.
I hate to nitpick that. No, it is.
It should be in 3 words.
Right. So it's, and they're referring there to the mayor and the county executive, both of whom I've taken to task on specific policies. They were both cheerleaders for Wisconsin's Act 12, which among things requires more police and more police dollars in our city budget forever. And if we don't, we lose shared revenue from the state, putting us into bankruptcy. And it also forced us to increase our sales tax, which is incredibly regressive. I came out very clearly and said these things are bad. We should not be.
So they're voting to take away their authority to change the budget as needed?
Yes, they were cheerleading Republican legislation, which said that we were ungovernable. So not just, regressive legislation, but deeply racist.
I'm going to speak and you real quick, and then you kind of nod if it makes sense. Like there is a model that has been discussed called the urban growth regime. And basically it involves centrist Democrats. So you have these highly concentrated Democratic metropolises. And instead of those places being homes of progressive legislation, what ends up happening is you get the most right-wing conservative Democrats in the safest and bluest seats. And they're funded by Republican donors who opportunistically put and they get accolades for being bipartisan donors, but in reality, they're far-right Republican donors. They support the Republican Party strongly, nationally and locally and statewide, but they also spend money in urban districts. And like you see with Jamal Bowman happened with him in his race with AIPAC, is Republican billionaires funded his Democratic Party opponent, and that Democratic Party opponent will be a conservative. And the way that these urban, districts and these very blue districts, deep blue districts, it's not just urban areas, it's deep blue districts, where you'll see these conservative Democrats, and you'll be like, how did that happen? And it is because Republican donors are intelligent and they donate to the most conservative Democrat in those districts. And then they go and push policies that will help developers, help landlords, and help push, this kind of Republican policy within the cities.
Yes. And it is comforting, I guess, and also terrifying to know that Milwaukee's not unique in that.
No, it happens that, Phil, every major city in America is like this. Every single one. There isn't a single, from Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia. I would say Philadelphia is probably the one that's the most advanced in pushing back against this, but it's still, as somebody who has kind of a national perspective on local issues, which is a weird combo, it's a pattern. It's not like each city is spontaneously coming here. It is, you have these kind of fiefdoms. It's very feudalistic. You have a billionaire here. He's the Philadelphia billionaire. He does the same thing as the Milwaukee billionaire does. And they all copy each other, and they have their little, fiefdoms where they soak money, and they all live in Los Angeles or New York. But, they have their little local, it is exactly like it was in the late feudal area. They all live at court, but they have their little, territory that they extract from. Jeff Yass in Pennsylvania is another example. Thank you, cack in the chat. So is that how Milwaukee, do you have like a kind of few local, very rich centimillionaires or billionaires that are involved deeply in Milwaukee politics?
Absolutely. And every time somebody left of even left of center pops up, they are smacked down with a ton of money. In this case, it was interesting. So it's both economic things, and in this case, it's my outspoken support for Palestine, free Palestine. Back in October, I refused to vote for extremely ridiculous legislation, which erased the idea that there had been any sort of conflict in the area for the last 3/4 of the century. The head of our election commission, a Democrat, publicly posted, who is this guy, this SOB? I'm going to find somebody, I'm going to fund them, I'm going to take them out. And she proceeded to cold call a ton of people who, to their credit, called me up afterwards and said, Ann Jacobs is trying to find somebody to remove you. And their reactions varied from, I actually like Ryan and his policies, to Ryan's sort of a jerk, but I like his policies, to I just don't want to run against, a Dem or a socialist or anything else. But they finally found somebody, kind of the bottom of the candidate barrel. And that's who they ran with. And they were throwing a ton of money against him. And he's their champion. So it's
you'll always find an opportunist and a scumbag to take money from AIPAC or wherever. If you're waiting for the entire population not to have zero scumbags, unfortunately you're going to be waiting forever. So yeah, I mean, I see that you also help support a ceasefire referendum. Can you talk about that for the war in Gaza?
Yeah. So on the county level, I brought forward a robust piece of legislation that used the G word, right? Talked about the genocide actually being genocide. And as part of my testimony on the floor of the Milwaukee County Board, I read some of the many quotes from our Israeli counterparts talking about how it was genocide, how the goal there was to eradicate Palestinians, to kill children. It was tough to read, but I was supported by more testimony from the public, both on the floor and in committee, than the county has ever seen. We broke every record for public engagement. And yet we still had folks on the other side saying, this is just Ryan and his a handful of minions. But we had hours and hours of testimony, 98% of which was in favor of putting the county on record as being opposed to genocide. And ultimately, it was watered down a little bit, but we did pass a resolution at the county calling for a ceasefire. Sorry, calling for. I pulled a Biden there. Calling for a ceasefire, not calling for a genocide. It was a victory, but it certainly came at a cost too. And we're seeing that now.
Yeah, I mean, I also see that you were part of the uninstructed movement. Isn't that right? And now that we're one day after the debate, I'm glad I brought you on, because I think we have an opportunity here to just kind of say, hey, we were right about this. Joe Biden is completely out of touch on Gaza and many other issues. And it's, threatening to put this country in the hands of Donald Trump, who is, in my opinion, a dangerous fascist, or a neo-fascist, or crypto, or whatever the hell you want to call it. He's somebody who doesn't believe in democracy or any of the principles of that we supposedly believe in this country, and he represents an escalation, in my view, beyond from more passive forms of control, like they're expressing against you using donor dollars, to actually more jackbooted thugs and more outright express, overt oppression. And so I think it would be bad for Donald Trump to be the president. But at the same time, Joe Biden has demonstrated himself to be completely out of touch. And in my view, somebody that we should consider replacing. Now, I hate to put you on the spot before the election, but what was your reaction to the debate last night?
The only part I was at a fundraiser for myself, which was extremely well attended, and we had some people shuttling out and forth between that and looking at the debates. The only parts of the debate that I've seen were on your Twitch stream, recently. So maybe somewhat biased, but I also throughout the night and this morning saw a ton of reactions to it, and it was clearly. Boy, even my my most moderate colleagues who are elected are casting around trying to figure out what to do. It's not good.
I want to say something, and you can give me your thoughts on my analysis. I actually think it would be good for the centrist Dems to get Biden to step down, because if he loses this election, it's going to put the Democratic Party into an active civil war again, between more progressive people and the centrists that have given us Joe Biden and the disaster in Gaza. And in 2028 we very well might see a progressive candidate or a left-wing candidate emerge. I don't know who that might be, but I think there's a strong chance in 2028, if Joe Biden is defeated, that could happen. Assuming we have elections again, or assuming God knows what could happen. I don't like to be a liberal who thinks that Trump is Hitler, but I also don't like to be so arrogant as to think that I couldn't be wrong, or he couldn't become extreme. He is unbalanced, and the people around him are insane. So who knows the way things get, and I don't have any faith in our institutions or law enforcement. You know what I mean? Like, no. So I think it would be bad. So sorry for rambling, but I just mean to say, I think it would actually be good for them if he stepped down and some replacement ran, because I think they would have a strong chance of keeping the Democratic Party in the hands of conservative Democrats and also beating Trump. So it's kind of wild to me that they're not doing that.
If that is the goal, yeah, that's the way to get there. And it's, I mean, I keep getting hammered from moderate folks, for not being sufficiently, blue no matter who. And it's completely ridiculous. Everybody that I'm talking to is not concerned about Biden versus Trump. I'm talking to the folks that are choosing between Biden and throwing their hands up and not showing up at all. The way that the mainstream Dems win is by courting those people and actually listening to them and not demonizing those of us who are talking to folks and are on the left and trying to, to minimize their concerns. So it is absolutely pragmatically idiotic to be continuing to blue no matter who this, because it is not working.
Well, I think the error that we all make, and maybe you can tell me if this is off or not, is that a lot of the centrist Dems don't care about anything. They're more institutionally oriented, meaning like they're about their personal power and advancement. And they see the Democratic Party as a vehicle for that. They don't really care if the Democratic Party wins, right? As long as they maintain their position. So if their position is good, the Democratic Party losing nationally or wherever, who gives a shit? They can fundraise off that, and the Republican Party, because they have such a reliance on oligarchic donors and oligarchic power, actually have people that are more like globally oriented for the Republican Party. And so like they'll fund someone, like they'll build districts to have the Republican Party gerrymander for the benefit of all Republicans in general, but not a specific Republican politician. But when Democrats draw the districts, they draw that for themselves, for the, the venal interest of their own power, not the Democratic Party as a whole. So you have like an imbalanced contest between Republicans who are coordinated by their, oligarchic institutions and Democrats who are fighting back with these individual fiefdoms of careerist, self-interested, apolitical even, apparatchiks, people that are just there to serve their own needs. Is that analysis kind of ring true to you at all?
Yeah, for some people, right? And it is ridiculous. I mean, we should be focused here in Wisconsin on making sure that the Republicans are in a distinct minority, right? Right now, the Dems have 35 seats. The Republicans have the rest out of 99. So there's almost a supermajority there in the assembly. And
but
yet,
vote, the Democrat, like Joe Biden won in Wisconsin. So like by the vote, it's probably more people are leaning to the left than leaning to the right in Wisconsin.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Joe Biden won by half of the margin that uninstructed took in the primary, right?
Yeah.
So about 48,000 votes. Yeah. And that's that should be telling. And I would hope that folks would listen to those people, but rather they go after them and me and are trying to shame them into voting against their conscience rather than talking to Biden and putting it on him and saying, what do we have to do to get those votes? If that's the goal.
All right. Well, what can we do to help? I have in my chat, I'm going to link it right now. Actually, you know what? Let's wait 2 minutes because Twitch just ran an ad. So let's go ahead and let's wait 2 minutes before I get into how we can help. Let me ask you one more thing. As far as oh, this is another thing I saw that I wanted to ask you about, which is what happened with you and the Milwaukee police?
Oh, yeah. So back in May of 2020, if you can, think back that far, I was a legal observer with the many folks taking to the streets after the brutal murder of George Floyd. So I was out there with my cell phones. I had just been elected to office at the county. So I had my county phone and my regular phone, and I watched as the Milwaukee police and the sheriff's department and several other agencies all swarmed on this one intersection, and they pushed a bunch of not even protesters, just people who were in that area
Yeah.
from a suburb.
Bystanders.
Yeah, from a suburb into the city of Milwaukee. The city of Milwaukee had a curfew. The suburb didn't. Then they proceeded to make really brutal arrests for being in the space that they were pushed into. I filmed one young black man who was grabbed by the Milwaukee police and smashed face first into a parked car. And the authorities took notice of that. I filmed a couple other things too. And then they tackled me. The problem there is that curfews don't apply to elected officials, just as they don't apply to police. They can't turn to each other and arrest each other. Although I'm very much in favor of a world where that happens. And what we asked for at the time in a settlement was for the city to clarify to the mayor that they can't just declare a curfew, because that's actually not how the law works. They are supposed to go to the common council. It's supposed to be a big deal. You're not supposed to be able to snap your fingers and just suspend
Remove everyone's rights.
Yeah, right. It's weird. There's supposed to be a due process for that. There were some weird parts to it too. All of the police turned off their body cams, but the Fire and Police Commission ruled that it was an accident, and that independently 100 people had just made this move. And we ended up finding some footage where it was clear that the police knew that I was an elected official and seemed to be targeting me specifically, and made the arrest anyway. We got all of the tickets thrown out, but it took them 3 years to come to a settlement. After the first day of trial, when the jury was literally laughing at the police, 3 years later, they claimed that I had a gun in my hand, which is why they gently tugged on my other arm and brought me to the ground rather than tackling me as they actually did. It was a wild trial, and it was they literally made it into a federal case rather than something local. But we ended up winning, getting a settlement, and before the Republican National Committee meets here soon in a matter of weeks.
Oh boy.
We're going to have that clarified. So hopefully fewer people will be beaten and killed than if we didn't have those things in place. So it took a long time. I'm glad we got there. But also still, I have to say, not thrilled that our mayor and our county executive and those same folks in leadership are rolling out the red carpet to the Republicans. We're also seeing headlines left and right about there not actually being a substantial economic impact for small businesses for the convention coming through, because as it turns out, the Republicans want nothing to do with Milwaukee, which is scary and full of black and brown folks, and they're going to stay in the suburbs and do their business here and then leave. So it's been bad, but we're trying to help.
All right, so that brings us to the most important part of our talk, which is how can we help? I'm going to go ahead and paste in my chat. I would bring it up on chat but ActBlue auto-populates your credit card, your home address, and every piece of information right on the main screen. So I'm not going to bring it up I'm not going to bring that up before I donate, but I would like to urge...
I think you should take that chance. I think you should be bold here. You should take that chance.
No.
If I have your info, it means
there's only 3,000 of us here.
Bunch of other socialists too.
There's only 3,000 of us. I'm sure a couple of the 3,000 of us that are here are not good people. Maybe. Could be. So I'm going to go ahead and protect myself. But what I will do, chat, is I want you all to go ahead, throw some money at Ryan. If you honestly believe in left-wing politics, if you've ever given me a subscription, if you've ever supported this community, and you're like, I want politicians that are right on the Gaza, that are right on local policy, that have solutions for the problems, that are willing to put their own asses on the line, there is not a single person in the entire country that lives that more than Ryan. Okay? So every single one of you who are whining about AOC not being good enough or Jamal Bowman not being good enough, if you're one of those people, you have the ultimate opportunity to put your money where your mouth is and throw $5, $10, $50, $500. What's the max?
The max here is $1,000.
$1,000 to Ryan so that people can see that standing up to AIPAC, standing up to the Israeli lobby, standing up to developers, standing up to police, standing up to corrupt democratic machine is going to at least get you some support. And you have so that was the time. And if you decide not to donate, then you no longer have the right to complain. You need to pay at least $20, $27 right now to Ryan in order to be able to complain to me ever again about AOC, Bernie Sanders, or any other politician. You have to buy the ticket. And if you complain to me about them in the future, I'm going to say, where's your receipt for Ryan? And if you don't have the receipt, you're going to get a timeout. That's the way it's going to go from now on. I am extorting you. I'm forcing all of, no, I'm just kidding. But I'm saying you have to give at least $27 to be able to complain about any politician, because Ryan puts his money where his mouth is. He's trying to build up the socialist movement in Wisconsin. He's trying to show an alternative to glad-handing, Republican butt-kissing, corrupt Democratic centrists who pretend like they oppose the Republican Party while they at the same time roll out the red carpet for them. What do you think they are in? Why do you think they're doing the convention in Wisconsin for? Because they're trying to win Wisconsin. And so the Democrats that roll out that red carpet are literally aiding and abetting Donald Trump. And if you're doing it for a couple of bucks, so you can have Republicans fly into your city and insult it and call it and spit on the residents and use the services and act in a way that is contrary to public order, that's what you're asking for. So I ask all of you, please, I'm going to contribute as well. And is there anything else that you would like to say? I'm sure you want to get back out on the trail, and I really appreciate you coming on. And I consider you one of our greatest triumphs on this stream.
I mean, thank you, Mike. I hate asking for money. Yesterday, we had a really successful fundraiser where the threat was, if we didn't meet our fundraising goal, that I would sing Hotel California for 7 minutes. And I thought that was good. Like, that was the best fundraising pitch I've ever heard. And boy, if I could just fly you out or have you record that and I can play it over and over again.
Well, I mean, it's just people ask for political bravery, and when it's in front of them, they act like, you know, you have to do something. You have to support it, even if it's as small as $27, right? You know, that's now a McDonald's combo, thanks to the greedflation that we've experienced under the Biden administration. So instead of having one McDonald's quarter pounder, go ahead and help get Ryan across the finish line.
Amazing. Thank you, Mike. I mean, and this does mean a lot. The first time I was on your Twitch stream, I knew very little about. I still know very little about Twitch. I'm only on here to watch you, once or twice a week, and I don't even understand what I'm looking at in the chat a lot. But when I was first running, and I saw those donations come in from across the country, it was during a really tough time in the campaign, and I broke down afterwards. I mean, I mean, and you know how it is to be a socialist and be under assault, both from the right and from moderates. It is a rough place to be, and I really, really appreciate you and the folks that are stepping out here to help out, because this is going to be a really close race. We're not going to outspend them, but if we can get to enough together for a mailing and to push back on that, it is huge. Thank you.
Well, we'll make sure we get a couple mailers funded for you, I hope. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate you for coming on, and we hold you deep in our hearts. And I will say this about Twitch. The thing about Twitch that people may not know is that the politics here are commanded by two socialists, me and Hassan. And there's very few platforms where that's the case. And so, and this is where young people are at, especially, young men, Zoomers. And so, and it's the same thing with TikTok. We're trying to build this stuff up in an organic way. It doesn't get recognized by the mainstream media. I can tell you that if I had 3,000 live concurrent viewers and I was a right winger, I'd be on Fox News every week, like literally. So like we're suppressed because we are representing a threat to the status quo. And like, when I get millions of hours watched every year, you're never going to see me invited on MSNBC. It's just the way it goes, because we do represent a change, and they know it. And liberals hate us. like real ideological liberals, not people that vote Democrat, not people that are good-hearted, not Democrats, but ideological neoliberals hate us more than they hate fascism, more than they hate Trump, because we represent an alternative, and that they know that if the people become aware that an alternative exists, they're going to discard them and they're going to want to build a better world. And as somebody who has seen it firsthand that it is possible, you can live in a humane city that cares for every resident, and it makes your life better too. You know, it's something that I'm never going to stop fighting for, no matter what attacks happen to me. You know, like no matter what people say about me, no matter what people do to me, that correctness, that righteousness is never going to waver. And that's what I see in you as well. And that's why I'm so glad we were able to bring you on. So thank you. Any last words?
No, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Brian Moritz for helping to set this up, and for Ron Jansen, who ran for my old supervisor seat and didn't win, but ran just a hell of a campaign.
Tell him to run again.
Yeah. I want him to run for sheriff here in Milwaukee County and to dismantle the entire. So that'll be the next one.
Oh man, I mean, you know, listen, like the thing about the sheriff's, I mean, that first of all, yes, but also.
We'll put a pin in that one, but he would be great.
yeah. I mean, you know, listen, sheriff's departments just kill people, you know, like.
But not if they're dismantled.
True. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you so much. And you know, I know you work hard. I know you burn the shoe leather. So thank you so much. And we're all behind you. If you ever need a pick me up, you can give me a call anytime.
Will do. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate you.
Have a good one. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, chat. Well, there you go.